like
financial
no, like
explain it to me. I wanted to finish early.
business innovation program.
Oh,
Always
that's
have
nice.
fucking
Ah,
doubt.
you went to PQL.
Now it's like the last second report.
Which I
have a,
use.
when am I gonna have a last second doubt?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Correction
I
to
remember.
do here, you know? What the hell?
But
Wait,
you know what?
make sure.
No, it was when you
Peer review,
Definitely in the right place. I mean,
It's supposed to help them solve a problem.
yeah. Peer review one. I have this one.
What? And you're paying
Oh.
how much?
700 pounds. You get a long sum.
Ah,
He already
yeah,
mentioned
then you're supposed
I
to
thought he was
like
coming.
even about you basically budget.
I mean, he definitely will be coming because he already told us, like, hey, if you have any other general questions, this is 3 hours, 3 o'clock session. He's definitely coming.
No, that's you know what? Ah, yeah.
I think I'm not.
You wanted to say
What?
like
What?
I
It can't work.
Hey Ken,
can't do it.
why don't you just jump and join us?
Yeah. He took a
I'm
lot.
afraid of getting caught in the middle.
You dance samba, you can do that, it's fine, like, you're flexible enough.
No, I don't get caught in the middle. No.
Like,
I like
okay, I'll take this side, he'll take the other side of this. And then he'll just shield you from
No,
the first.
I'm still with everyone.
We are so hot.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. Because when are we getting assigned?
Oh, the supervisor?
Yeah.
Monday afternoon, yeah.
Monday afternoon. We'll have to
We were supposed to get it on the 21st.
How many days?
We're getting it on the 6th of March.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of an
Getting the
issue.
Monday afternoon. I thought you said the deadline for.
17 draft.
Yeah.
So that means we have
Like
now,
now,
like,
now we have,
less
I was
than
like,
3 weeks.
yeah, just 11 days.
To write a draft.
I don't know about you, but like we have
Yeah.
three consecutive assignments. Like 17th for this, 24th for the, no, sorry, no, 24th for the
Yeah, installation.
installation, 22nd for the TV.
Well, between those 10 days, you need to for one.
Oh, it's one of 2 exercise.
Yeah, because I think that
What type of review am I supposed to make?
And it's like 20% or 40. Like 40%. Or you take
I'll check with them. But I'll ask them if they can push the deadline. When does Easter start?
It looks like I want to now do it.
So he probably won't accept to do it on then. Oh, if at least 21st, 22nd, maybe.
I can't wait to not have to do that.
Hey guys, happy Friday. We're here at some of the candidates for the union elections. I don't know if you've seen stuff about it before. It closes within just over an hour, so it's really important you have your say within the union that represents you. So yeah, each of them is going to introduce themselves. Yeah, okay, I'm Dan. I'm rerunning for Vice President Engagement. I've been doing it for almost a year already. I want to introduce loyalty points with all the union outlets, more short-term volunteering opportunities, and more money for enterprise projects.
My name's Greg Williams and I'm running to be the next Vice President for the creative industry. My main aim is to try and make it easier for you to get your voices heard by the union, because I know at the moment a lot of people feel like you have to be uber keen and uber involved in the union to actually have a say on what happens. Also, I'm in charge of the creative side, so I want to try and make it easier for you guys to get involved in performing arts and with some of the shows. So if you like some of the arts, sound, those ideas, I've got some things with my face on which you can read after the lecture. But I definitely say both because it's really important you have your face. Who's some of my friends?
I don't know any of them, so.
I
Hi guys, my name's Laura. I'm currently a vice president of communities and I'm running
我选这个女的。
So if you want to see me, you can ask me no matter what campus you're on, no matter what time of year it is, and no matter what you're studying. Make sure you go to the Union Southampton School. That's right, I'm very sure I know what you do.
Hello, I'm Steve. I made a Pokemon video. Also, I am running your VP Sports. I'm really experienced. I've got loads of practical solutions to help run sports club. I'm really interested in giving more attention to the intramural programs. So if you like intramural players, won't be giving positive change. Yeah. Well, thanks for listening, guys. I'm going to let you go about an hour today. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Adios.
I've
got nothing against them. It's just that I'm a master student. I've been here for 5 months, so I don't give a shit. It's nothing personal. I just don't give a shit. Well, yeah. Well, it's not just that. It's like I'm gonna vote them in. I'm gonna leave before I see anything.真没多少人。
Oh, you went out discussing
Like Wednesday's the worst because like 9 to 10 leave. Sorry, no, not even 9 to 10. It's just come at 5 for this and leave.
Yeah, but we do that.
Oh no, we do have the what?
On Tuesday, that's what we do.
No, Tuesday we will. Monday we will. Wednesday is always pushed off
Yeah.
because we have like installation and then like the professor always says like we won't have anything to do. So then, like, work. I mean there isn't much to do. That much to do anyway. Like 2 lectures is already more than enough to finish what he wants to do. So at least we'll have time to meet up and do our work, like your group and then.
So I'm missing out on one thing next week.
I think so. Well, avoiding what? Did we already finish avoiding plagiarism? We already finished it, right?
Good afternoon. So one quick update for next week.
I don't know.
The lecture, so I'll be using lecture 3 for the CS cohort. Our library representative will be coming and discussing the tools that are available for you to search for information and to do research in the library and online, the tools that the library provides. That's very important. That'll be lecture 3 for the CS cohort and a special red lecture on Wednesday at 5 for the Triple E cohort. I did put that information in an email. I'll also be doing the Avoiding Plagiarism discussion lecture for the Triple E cohorts on Friday next week at 1 o'clock. Alright? Any questions? Okay. Second thing. Choices allocation has been made. iSolutions finally got the system to work at 12 o'clock today. So the allocations, the initial allocation is with the program leaders for checking. So if any of you have made requests to the program leaders directly, they will be amending the allocation accordingly.
and I will put the allocation list up on Monday once I've got everyone signed up on the lists are fine. Okay?
I'll try and go and see Dr. James. Just because
Well, like I said last,
Yeah, but he's not doing that.
I'll put the list on
Yeah, but he
the
has
notes
the same.
page that you can
But
look
he
at.
has it same.
And it will be visible on your profile on the intranet as well. So on your personal profile on Secure, your allocation should be visible to you as well. Alright? Okay, so that's right. Okay, so I'd like to introduce okay, so I'd like to introduce the chair of the Faculty Ethics Committee. As I said back at the beginning, there's two scenarios in which ethics matters to you, right? For some of you, you will have to make an ethics submission in order to proceed with your project. So extremely likely in the case of some of your summer projects that there is an ethical oversight requirement for the project, and you will need to make an application. That application needs to be made in advance. So you cannot start your project until you've made that submission. Okay? So part of today will be to introduce that process to you and also to guide you towards whether or not you need to do it. For the rest of you, you are required to write ethical statement as part of the project plan, which we will talk about later when I cover the project plan coursework. So hopefully you'll get some ideas from the discussion about ethics, about what goes in that particular part of writing the project plan. Okay, so I'd like to introduce Brian to introduce you to all things ethics. Or ethical. He's very ethical. Okay. Any questions about course matters before I speak? No. Good. Oh no. No. Yes.
You did say to leave it to this session, so.
Okay. Cool. Yes, I did.
Yeah. That's true. Because we were late by nearly 2 weeks in terms of the supervisor assignment.
I already moved the deadline.
Yeah.
So.
The turn it in, could you push it a few more days for her? From the 17th to like the 20th or 21st?
Okay, that's not it's not there's no real deadline implications on that, so if you want to submit to that later on, just let me know and I'll put it to turn it in and give you the output whenever you do it. Okay?
Thank you.
It's not a hard deadline, that one.
That's all.
He's talking about the draft submission of the review for the turn it in thing. That's merely for your information. So that deadline is not a real deadline.
Alright, thank you.
Having said that, I'll move it back anyway. Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Thank you. Good afternoon, my name is Brian Pickering, and as already been said, I hope you can hear me. I have a very quiet voice. Because I'm talking about ethics, you cannot shout at me. I have human rights as well. So I currently chair the busy Faculty Ethics Committee, which means that I'm responsible for checking all of your applications and managing my peers when we go through a review to check that you are ethically compliant, if that is appropriate for your project. I have a whole slide deck, as you will see, which contains lots and lots of information For those of you who read quickly, I'm sure you'll be able to read it all, and therefore I don't need to tell you. But I'd quite like to encourage you to start thinking about your research and what you're doing, and introduce the ethics into it. So at any time, if you have any questions, please do stop me and ask, and I will happily respond in any way I can. Nicholas was saying before that the BCS, and I can't remember the other organisation, require you to be ethically compliant. As well as the BCS, I also belong to the BCS, the British Psychological Society, and a lot of what you'll see now comes from the area of psychology, and I'll explain a little bit why in a moment.
No whatsoever.
We, the Ethics Committee, and each of the faculties has its own Ethics Committee, because of course they specialise in their own discipline. There is also the University Ethics Committee. Meets in the Senate room, it's fabulous. That's fabulous again. And the university requires that every student, every member of staff, every researcher attached to this university submit an appropriate research protocol to the Ethics Committee if there are ethical implications. So any research you do, and Nicholas said that there are two different cohorts here. One being you will have to make an ethical statement to explain that you actually understand the principles and why you don't actually need to make a submission, or you will need to make a submission which will come through my committee. Research, we're interested in research ethics here at the university for obvious reasons. Research is basically anything which seeks to take the discipline, the academic subject that you're interested in, to the next level. And I'll give you some examples as we go through, and you can decide whether or not you think that that's research and whether it needs approval. To begin with, does anybody recognise this picture?
What's happening? Somebody's been filmed?
Okay. Do you think it's real? Do you think it's simulated?
Real.
Okay, so it's a real prison guard
With shitty
with a weapon, and some guy here with a paper bag in his head. In fact, it is an experiment.
Yeah,
A very famous experiment. If you look at the psychological literature, the psychology literature, run by a man called Zimbardo. One-to-one, I'll tell you what I think of Zimbardo, but there you go. He ran this famous experiment which is called the Stanford Prison Experiment. And remembering that this came shortly, or a couple of decades after the Second World War, and the atrocities committed during the Second World War, Zimbardo wanted to establish whether ordinary people, like all of us in this room, could resort to evil tactics in our power situation. So there were a bunch of students. They were randomly assigned. Half of them were guards, and half of them were prisoners. After a few days, this was the kind of thing that was happening. And the experiment had to be abandoned early on because of the psychological problem that the prisoners developed. And they were just perfectly ordinary. They were actually middle-class Americans. And he was demonstrating the breakdown of behavioural norms. But because of that, and another experiment, very famous experiment as well, this is Milgram, which may be a little closer to home. Milgram basically wired somebody up to a machine and had a teacher who was instructed to increase the voltage if this guy didn't remember things. So it was a learning task. And you can see there was one of the participants there who was actually very distressed. So on the back of these two major experiments, and anybody who does psychology has to look at these experiments, a set of ethical principles behind research were developed, and each civilized country across the universe has its own set, but they all come back to the same criteria. Now this may look a little bit far-fetched, but if you do some experimental work, there are lots of different ways that you do experiments, that you do studies. There is the controlled environment, where you would test, you control one variable and see what effect that has on the dependent variables. There are field experiments or observational studies where you go out and watch what people do. But there are also focus groups and interviews where you sit around and you ask people their views, you ask them to discuss with each other. And there are surveys. Surveys are the most common. There is an iSolution site which allows you to develop and run a survey and collect all the information. All of these require ethical approval. So what I'm going to cover is why we as an institution are looking for you to understand what the ethical principles are across the treatment of the participants in a study, but also issues around privacy, about the data of the participants, exemptions for research, because of course we are a research environment and there are certain clauses which mean that we can be a little more tolerant, as it were. The process itself, which is a system called Ergo, absolutely fantastic, and what types of study you need to be looking to gain approval for. Unfortunately, like everything else, we get involved in things like health and safety, data protection, copyright issues. Those are not ethical issues specifically, but they are important for the work that we do. Because we're trying to turn it in, talk on plagiarism that actually relates to copyright. That's not an ethical issue per se. So, why do you need to look for ethical approval in your studies? Okay, so it's policy at the university, and there are requirements around the protection of individuals as well as their data, especially personal data. There's the insurance cover for the university. And there are also issues if you are going, as you go on through your academic career, if you're looking for funding, then you need to be able to demonstrate that you are compliant. And if you wish to publish anything, they will very often ask for certain bits of information and assurances. So those are all the sort of official reasons why you would want to do it. There is also a personal reason. If you do not get ethical approval for a study which you need approval for, then this will lead to sanctions. This tends to be more dramatic the later on you are in your academic career. But there are cases where doctoral or master's theses have been rejected purely on the basis that there was no approval. This is very serious. The university takes it very, very seriously, because obviously, ultimately, it affects the reputation of Southampton as a university, which of course is one of the Russell Group universities. And of course, we would not have you here if you did not believe we were a quality institution. But there's more to it, and this is just my opinion. As I said at the start, okay, I can give you lots of information about a lot of issues, a lot of human rights, copyright, etc., but I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested, because we are in an academic environment, that we understand the implications of what we do. And you may not have thought, because you don't do social science, etc., you may not have thought that the technology which you are interested in, you're looking at, has a direct effect on humans. And that is an ethical issue. privacy you need to take that into account. And as I say, in my opinion, in an academic institution, this is an area where we can understand the broader context of what we're studying. The basis of all ethics are fundamental human rights. So every individual in this room has certain rights. I have no right to do certain things to you, nor you to me. And that is enshrined in our fundamental basis for the whole society. Sometimes you will see it in legislation, but legislation is not foolproof. And at the end of the day, it's all about treating people appropriately and treating them equally. Okay. So, how do I treat the participants in my study? I need to think on what we look for in the ethics committee when we're looking at the applications that we see. Does the participant know what they are being asked to do, and therefore are they able to make informed consent? It shouldn't be effective, you shouldn't hide the reasons for your study. There are cases where you can do that under special circumstances. You should not be forcing people into taking part. Now, coercion also means for your peers, ringing up your pal and saying, I have a deadline to meet, please come along with all your friends and take part, could be regarded as coercion. It's also bad research practice because you need to sample appropriately. There are also things of the protection of data. It shouldn't be intrusive, it shouldn't be invasive, it shouldn't leave the participants with emotional, psychological, physical strain. So those are the major principles, the back of it. And it is, it is at the end of the day a balancing act. And it's important that we all realise, and we in the ethics community take this on board, that there are times, and specifically in the types of technology that you look at, that there may be a good reason that a participant has to undergo a certain amount of risk or pain or psychological stress, because the benefit of that research is so great. If you think for a moment, if we insisted that there should be no harm to participants, I'm not just talking about us here in Southampton, but if no research were possible, no investigation were possible, then no medicines would be developed. There would not be the first heart transplant, there would not be the first organ transplant, etc. But we have to balance that risk, and part of your ethical statement is to say that, or to demonstrate that you have made an appropriate balance between the risk and the benefit. Briefly, this is more to do with data protection. I was interested in when the guys came in before to encourage you to vote for them, and they all had their pictures on a little flyer and presumably their contact details, etc. They have made a decision to disclose that information. But any information which on its own or coupled with other information that may be available outside that can identify a living human being is regarded as personal data, and we have an obligation to protect those data. Okay? So you cannot simply, for example, send a mailing list of all your friends here in Southampton out to anybody. That would be an invasion of data protection for each of those individuals. There is also a provision, and I know you're not all from the UK, but certainly within the European Union. And the UK hasn't left the EU yet. But within the EU, there is a provision that you can swap data between countries, so that needs to be controlled. And there are different laws at the moment in specific countries. So in Spain, for example, there is almost no way you can distribute information about children, or at least you need both parents to agree to that. In Germany, which is part of the reason why Google Maps and Google Street View has such difficulties, there are more restrictive privacy laws than in the rest of the EU. But the point of that is that we would look, you know, if you're doing a study which is based in, I don't know, the Arab Emirates, then we would want to know, are you passing personal data and what protection is there, and are you in compliance with appropriate laws. The DPA, the Data Protection Act, as it says at the top, Data Protection Act 1998, we do actually have social rights in the ethics committee, but we know this kind of stuff as well. The Data Protection Act 1998 was based on the European Directive 95/47. I practiced that before. So that effectively gives data protection in the UK much the same protection as in different countries, though there are variances, as I said. Well, the DPA says that personal data may only be retained for a certain period of time. So in your ethics application, you would have to say, I will hold these data for a year or whatever. The participants of the data subject must have the right to access the data, to check what you are holding on them, and to update them if they feel it's appropriate. They may also withdraw their data. So if you, I don't know, you've been taking temperature for people over a period of time, somebody comes up and says, you know what, I don't want people to know my temperature across this period of time. You are bound by the law to remove their data. And finally, you may not use the data or share those data with anybody else unless the data subject has been given the opportunity to agree or oppose. There are some qualifications around it, especially for the last 3 years. So, as far as data protection is concerned, the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which replaces the directive, this will become law in all member states of the European Union in May 2018. So the UK, of course, will still be part of the EU at that stage. But it will also affect the way that data, personal data, can be shared with non-member states. So that's the guiding principle. But there's also, and again, I've said before, we need to think about various things. What people often don't realise, if you're doing interviews or focus groups, for example, it's very common to record it, and obviously all of this kind of device. Very common to make an audio recording or a video recording, and then to transcribe it so you can do whatever analysis on, if you're doing a qualitative study, for example. But of course, audio data is personal data, because I can be identified from my voice, as can everybody in this room. A lot of people forget that, so if you have audio data, then it comes under the Data Protection Act. Moving on. There is a special category of data called sensitive personal data. It's called special category in European law. And this refers to a specific set of information. Ethnic origin, political opinion, trade union membership, religious affiliation, religious or philosophical affiliations. Crime, so your criminal record, GDPR is loosening about criminal records. If anybody's cynical about politicians, you can see why that is. But for you specifically, depending on the devices, if you get involved in biomedical devices, then obviously you would have information and data that related to the physical and mental health, well, physical health at least, but possibly the mental health depending on the device, and even the sexual health, so depending on the type of study that you decide to do. This set of data, if you have any data, personal data that falls into this category, you can only process it with the explicit consent of the data subject. But obviously there are a few kind of interesting issues. If, for example, you think about it, somebody will make a guess about ethnic or racial background based on where you look. That's not necessarily to stereotypes, it's just we're used to doing that. And so there is this provision that if the information, it goes to halfway house really. If the information is in the public domain and the data subject has chosen to make that public, then you're not covered by the by the Data Protection Act. And the final thing is something which is exercising most people, and certainly in ETS, which is where I'm based, the use of secondary data. So of course there's huge amounts of data now available on the internet. We of course host a web observatory here with lots of different data sets. We can only use that within specific guidelines, and that's the secondary data use. Okay. There is another issue which I would like you to encourage you to think about. Data protection or privacy sounds like a fantastic thing. If I don't want you to know who I am, then I should have the right to hide my image. However, if you think of a virtual environment, it cuts both ways. Because obviously in a virtual environment I can present myself as anybody. And so things like cyberbullying, grooming, etc., the perpetrator is protected by normal data protection. And that's part of the reason that the criminal record is gone. Right. So, there are certain exemptions for research. Specifically, we can hold the data almost indefinitely, and certainly when you go on to Masters by Research, and if you go on to a doctorate, the university would expect your data to be held and made available to other researchers for at least 10 years. The exemption is only for data which is used for historical, statistical, or specific research purposes. Okay? The category I was talking about before, sensitive personal data or special category data, as far as the European Union is concerned, may only be used in a way that the data subject didn't agree to at the beginning, if that does not lead to a negative effect for them. Okay? So, for example, if you had if from a medical device you had information which indicated that somebody was, I don't know, hiding the fact that they had potentially dangerous conditions, high blood pressure or something like that, you might disclose that as a duty of care to the individual, but you employer, for example, and they make the decision that they can no longer be employed. But generally the same principles apply. We are looking that people have understood and abide by the data protection, the principles behind the data protection order. There are some interesting exceptions. We ran a study recently where we were talking to sufferers of rheumatoid arthritis, so a chronic condition, to investigate the appropriateness of a technology. So they had a wearable device that would check how much movement they went through in a day. And they also had an application on their smartphone or tablet. And at the end of each day, they could simply touch a picture of the human body to say where it hurt. So that data was all collated, sent off to the medical team, so that when the patient went to see the medical team, every 3-6 months or whatever, all of the information was there. Right. So this is a classic case where those data would be special category data, sensitive data, which needs to be protected at the next level and can only be used with explicit consent from the users. One of the questions we asked them was, do you mind if your data is shared? And to ask Bryce, they said no. If it means that we get better treatment, or if it means that the community of fellow sufferers are happy, that they get benefit out of it, then the information can be shared with anybody. So there are cases where people will make their own decisions, and their decisions need to be respected. And we would look for that in the ethics application. Another thing which is close to home maybe, there are now a lot of medical devices. There was a big hoo-ha recently because things like pacemakers, the new devices which release insulin, etc., could actually be hacked. So somebody could get into them because there was a wireless interface, and of course that wouldn't be good news for the patient. Even though the motivation for those devices is to improve the quality of the life of the patient. But we would be looking to see that that risk has been identified and that there are adequate provisions made so that the individual understands, so that the data subject understands, but also you make the correct provision and the correct assessment to balance the benefit against the potential risks. Okay. So, this is Ergo. This is the process through Ergo. If you go on to ergo.stop.ac.uk, sign in your credentials, you'll see the system. So basically you have to submit the description of so a research protocol along with participant information, which is the sheet that you would give to data subject and say, this is what it's about, and then the consent form, and they would sign saying, yes, I understand the participant information, yes, I've had the opportunity to ask any questions, and I agree to know it's being used. So they would sign that, and that would be basically what we would be looking for. Basically anything which involves human participants or is likely to affect human beings, so that could be in the environment, has to go through ethical approval. If there is personal inheritance, if personal data is involved, so any data which could identify on its own or in connection with any other data which are available, if it contains personal data, then there must be a data protection, a DPA plan. So that's an additional piece of information that provide. And then if there are risks, if there are known risks, if there is an element of deception, which is allowed, although we don't particularly want it, to encourage it, if it's intrusive, if the data subjects are of diminished capacity, so if they have mental health issues, if they are minors, then there is additional information that we require. Specifically on deception, we would want a debrief plan. This is very typical in psychology studies. It's very typical in psychology studies that to enable a spontaneous response to a given environment, you wouldn't tell people what the purpose of the study was. But then you would have a debrief session at the end to say, well, actually, this is what we're doing. And so similarly, in a medical environment, you might say we're taking the pulse, but in fact, there are good reasons why you're looking for the skin conduction. So there are specific reasons why you may wish to go through deception, but there does need to be a debrief plan. If sensitive data is involved, if it's invasive, if it involves human tissues or animal tissue, and if the participants cannot withdraw, then you will need additional special approval, and that will come to me in the first instance, but it will also go to research governance. So, those are the basic documents you require: the participant information, which tells the participant what you're doing, the consent form, which as I understand, and then the protocol, the research protocol, so that when you're going to collect your data. There is, of course, an interesting issue here. If you're doing surveys online, for example, they might be completely anonymous. If you get assigned consent form, that's personal data. You may not have any personal data in the survey itself, but the consent form is personal data, so you will need a DPA plan. DPA plan, if you have personal data, which of course would include the consent form. If any of the factors on the right, on the left, apply, then you would need a risk assessment. Otherwise, you don't need a risk assessment. That's to do with health and safety. And so that comes under across the university. And of course, something which, at some stage in your academic career, you will come across. If it's invasive, then you will need additional review and approval. So, I picked out a couple of studies around bioelectronics. This one, there's a bunch of senior clinicians, so they would describe themselves as experts, giving their views across 11 countries about certain chemical sensors being used and whether that's useful. So this is a survey of experts for their opinions. Would you need ethical approval? Anyone want to guess? Yeah. Why would you need ethical approval?
Serving people and sensitive information that you need.
Right, okay. So when So, but for a simple survey, it's on the borderline. You have got to keep them positions because you've got clinicians. The reason that you wouldn't go for approval is because they're experts just doing their own job. But you're right to pick up the sensitive data because as soon as you've got anything medical, somebody's going to say, thank you for approval. Second one is the bioelectronic nose. So this is checking its receptiveness, and it's based on the olfactory system. I don't know anything about this device whatsoever. I know about the olfactory system and the biopsychology behind it, but that's as far as it goes. EFSA approval? It's difficult to tell actually if you're no. You wouldn't need approval because there's no human involvement. The development of the bioelectronic nose would have needed approval. Quite a lot of approval. But it doesn't involve any, well, as far as we know, no human costs. And the final one. One thing note, what is it? Hydrogen peroxide detecting electroenzymatic. On my the glucose electrode. Subcutaneous tissue and plasma. That's what we yeah. LGO approval as well. Basic. It would doubtless need NHS approval. Okay, so if you're looking for approval, you go into the Ergo system, ergo.com/2010, download the most recent template, is changed all the time. You have to submit well before your research if your project is going to start. Well before is at least a fortnight. We do what we can to turn things around quickly. We all, we do this voluntarily. We do everything in the university voluntarily. We do. So we have day jobs as well. We cannot guarantee that we can turn it around. If you've forgotten at 6 p.m. the night before you're due to start taking your lecture, you ain't going to get approved in time. So, well before the beginning of your research, you upload all of the relevant documentation to Ergo. As a student, it will go through your supervisor, so you have additional time that the supervisor will see it. Then it comes to us, then we will review it, and it will come back to you. Important thing there, we will not, if you've already done your study, you can't come to us and say, oh, PCC. It's the university policy that we will not do that, because we have no way of checking that what you're going to do is appropriate. The other thing, don't worry if we come back to you and say, I'm sorry, you're missing this. There may be a cycle, especially for the first time you do it. I'm always happy to help people as much as my job allows. So, as you're putting things in, I'm very happy to explain things to people. There's a lot of people in this room. But please don't assume that if it gets rejected, it's not a bad design, it's just that you haven't given us the right bit of paper. And remember, you have to give us enough time. The most important thing, and if you're dealing with, if those conditions on the first study were in the UK, a part of the NHS, you would need NRES approval as well. If, to any employee of the NHS or any patient of the NHS, if they are your data subject, you need NRES approval. NRES is the NHS regional ethics. So they're like, but they're for the NHS. Obviously, they have to check the reputation because the NHS brand is very important. But if you're thinking of doing anything with a patient, then you need to be doing it now because NRES approval will take a long time, like 6 months if you're lucky. The people in the department who work directly with the NHS will have experience with this and they will be able to help. But that's in addition to the approval you get from us. There's also some other things. Once you have approval, that number goes on any write-up. So, if you're producing a dissertation or a thesis, you should refer back to the ergo number. If, because this kind of thing happens, if you wish to change anything, either about the research protocol, so you're going to do something slightly different, you've tried out your first couple of patients, if you're doing patients or students with a device on their arm or something, and it's not working, so you have to make modifications. So if there are any changes, then you request an update on the original application. Usually that's just a formality as long as it doesn't deviate too much. If it's within the same remit, then we're usually happy. And that includes an extension in time. If you're still doing data collection after the expiry of the approval, then obviously it doesn't apply anymore, so you have to tell us and we'll, that's usually an automatic thing. There's also university insurance. That's not part of the ethics process, but we'll see it in ergo. You have to answer these various questions. That's to do with the university insurance. It certainly would affect PhD level research because if somebody decides to sue the university for the insurance, will come and deal with that. So, there we go. You have to have ethics approval for any study which involves human participants or will affect human participants, so the environment as well. Anything which includes human participants or will affect human participants. It cannot be given retrospective approval. If you have human participants, and the assumption is you tell them exactly what you're going to do, you have their consent, they understand, they have the right to withdraw their information if they wish. But you have to have very good reasons if the device is going to be intrusive, if the device is going to cause harm or discomfort, hopefully not harm. And any of the ways there's coercion, but restrictions where participants will not have access or the ability to withdraw their data, that needs special additional approval. And all ergo reference numbers, so that the online system should go on any communication. Okay. That's me. Any questions, any queries, any concerns? How long does it take? Right. Depending on the complexity of the study, it will, if it's a straightforward observational or survey kind of thing, then we try to get that there any questions? Please offer this one.